morning, Miss Hoffman's class. So, we're in our second to last chapter of Pinocchio today. It's chapter 17. Pinocchio finds his father. So, in the last chapter, we talked about Pinocchio was swallowed by the shark. And then he saw a light coming in the distance, and so he followed the light, right? Pinocchio walked for what felt like miles to get to the source of the light. Finally, he found it. And can you guess what it was? A candle stuck in a glass bottle, sitting on a table. At the table sat not a fish, but a little old man munching on something. Pinocchio squinted and looked closer. Wait, could it possibly be? He wanted to laugh. He wanted to cry. He wanted to say 1,000 things. But all he could do was stand still, stuttering and stammering broken. This was the image. So who do you think the little old man is? At last, with a great effort, he opened his arms wide and ran, rushing to embrace the little old man. Father, I found you at last! The old man rubbed his eyes. Could it possibly be? He stammered and blinked. Are you really my dear little Pinocchio? Pinocchio assured him that indeed he was. Sitting on his father's lap, he then proceeded to tell him in an excited rush everything that had happened since they had been parted ways. I saw you when you swam out to reach me, Geppetto explained, but I could not get the boat back to shore. The waves were so rough, and this terrible shark came and swallowed me. Have you been here in the shark's stomach for the past 2 years? Pinocchio asked amazed. How have you survived? Geppetto explained that the shark had also swallowed a large sunken ship, free of sailors, but loaded with meat, canned goods, crackers, raisins, coffee, cheese, sugar, candles, and matches. Unfortunately, Geppetto said, I am down to my final crumbs and my very last candle. And then, my son, we shall find ourselves sitting in darkness. Then there's no time to lose, Pinocchio cried. We must try to escape. Pinocchio suggested that they run out of the shark's mouth and dive into the sea. But Geppetto, like the toonie, was scared and unsure. I can't swim, he added. Well, I can, Pinocchio replied. I will carry you on my shoulders. Don't be afraid, come on. Father and son walked a long while through the stomach and the whole body of the shark. When they reached the throat, they stopped and hid behind a tonsil, waiting for just the right moment to make their move. That poor asthmatic shark slept with its mouth open in order to breathe. Pinocchio could look out and see the starry sky. Grabbing Geppetto's hand, Pinocchio whispered, Now! The two climbed up the throat, walking carefully on their tiptoes across the shark's thick, spongy tongue, trying not to tickle him. But tickle him they must have, for at that moment the shark gave a terrible wheeze, violently sucking them back down his throat, into his stomach. To make matters worse, the candle had now gone out, and the two were left in darkness. Oh well, Geppetto said, we tried, and we will try again. Pinocchio vowed, give me your hand, dear father, and don't be scared. With these words, Pinocchio led his father back up the throat, across the tongue, and carefully over 3 rows of teeth. At the edge of the shark's mouth, Pinocchio told his father to climb aboard. With Geppetto seated comfortably on his shoulders, Pinocchio did a swan dive into the ocean and began to swim. The sea was smooth, and the moon lit their way. Finally, they were free, reunited, and headed home. Everything seemed fine until Pinocchio noticed that his father was shivering violently in the cold water. Hang in there, Pinocchio said. We're almost at the shore. Geppetto weakly lifted his head. I see nothing but sea and sky. Pinocchio had to admit that his father was right, and he himself was getting weak and starting to shiver from the cold of the water. Still, he tried to comfort the old man. I see it, he lied. And this time, perhaps, because his lie was for very good cause, his nose stayed put. Pinocchio continued to try his best. Soon, however, he could not fake it any longer. He was exhausted too. It was over. I'm so sorry, Father, he whispered, his head just barely above the water, and his father and son started to sink. Just then, a gravelly voice called out from beneath the water. "What's the trouble?" A head popped up, and wouldn't you know it, it was the tunny fish that had been with them in the terrible shark's stomach. "Tunny?" Pinocchio asked. "How did you escape? I thought you had given up." "I had," the tunny said, "but then I decided to be brave. I followed you. You saved my life, and now I shall save yours. Climb aboard my back, and I shall soon have you safely to shore." "Are we too heavy?" asked Pinocchio once they were aboard. "You are light as seashells. You are light as seashells," answered the fish, and in just a few seconds they had reached the shore. After thanking the tunny and wishing him well, Geppetto and Pinocchio began to walk. Almost immediately, they came upon two rough-looking characters. It took Pinocchio a second, but eventually he realized it was Fox and Cat. After pretending to be blind for so many years, Cat now had really lost his sight in both of his eyes. And Fox, old, thin, and almost hairless, had been forced to sell his fancy, bushy tail for some bread. They were pathetic. "Help us, Pinocchio," they begged. "Give us something." This time, however, Pinocchio was not fooled by these false friends. He gave them only some priceless advice. "Remember," he said, "money, and especially stolen money, never bears fruit in the field of wonders or anywhere else." "That's it?" Cat asked. "That's all you're going to give us?" "It's more than you deserve," Pinocchio said, and he and Geppetto continued on their way. They soon came upon a tiny cottage built of straw, and they knocked on the door. "Who is it?" said a tiny little voice from inside. "A poor father and a poorer son," they replied, "nearly drowned and starving without shelter." "Come in," the little voice cried. Geppetto and Pinocchio entered. They looked high and low, but saw no one there. "I'm up here," the voice cried from above. There on a beam sat Cricket. "Dear Cricket," Pinocchio cried happily. "Oh, now you call me dear Cricket. But do you remember when you threw a hammer at me and ignored my warnings?" "I'm so sorry," Pinocchio replied. "You're right. You have always been right. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But my poor father, won't you?" Cricket smiled. "I will help you both," he said. "I only wanted to remind you that in this world we must treat others the way we wish to be treated." Alrighty, everybody. So sorry, my allergy is really bad today. But in this chapter, what did we learn? We're almost to the end. That's our last chapter there. All right. I hope you have a great day, everybody.